Yes, a very good morning to everyone. Today again we are going to start a live streaming and a presentation by Miss Anushka, who's going to present the last chapter, the framing of the Indian Constitution. Children, you are very lucky that you will be having a very good peer learning session and presentation. To look forward for a very good session on the peer learning. Over to Anushka. Anushka, you are most welcome the platform to give your presentation. Over to Anushka, please.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah, Anushka, you open your camera, please, so that you are
Yes, ma'am.
visible. Yes. Very good morning, Anushka. Most welcome for your presentation and all the best.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yes.
Morning. The chapter that I'm assigned today is Theme 15, Framing of the Constitution, the beginning of a new era. In this chapter, we will learn about how the Constitution was framed, what dominant voices were there, and what deliberations occurred on different issues. It is a sovereign, socialist, secular, democratic republic with a parliamentary system of government. The republic is governed in terms of the Constitution of India, which has adopted by the Constituent Assembly on 26 November 1949 and came into force on 26 January 1950. The Indian Constitution, which came into effect on 26 January 1915, has a dubious distinction of being the longest in the world, but its length and complexity are perhaps understandable when one considers the size of the country. A constitution is one of the longest constitution. We can consider the length and the duration of in which it was made because of the size of the country and how diverse we are. At independence, India was not merely large and diverse, but also deeply divided. The Constitution of India was framed between December 1946 to November 1949. The first subtopic is a tumultuous time. The years immediately preceding the making of the Constitution have been exceptionally tumultuous. It shows the background of the Constitution. It tells us about the time before the Constitution was framed. Yes, ma'am?
No, you do.
It was a very complex time. India was free, but at the verge of division. On 15th August 1947, India had been free, but it had also been divided. It was on the verge of being divided. India was on the verge of being divided into India and Pakistan. The fresh popular memory were the Quit India struggles of 1942. It was one of the most widespread movement against the British, as well as the bids by Subhash Chandra Bose to win freedom through armed struggles with foreign aids. Among the more recent upsurge had also evoked much popular sympathy. This was the rising of the rating of Royal Indian Navy in Bombay and other cities in the spring of 1947. Through the late 1940s, there were periodics, if scattered, its mass protests of workers and peasants in different parts of the country. One of the striking features of these popular upsurges were the degree of Hindu-Muslim unity they manifested. Two leading political parties, the Congress and the Muslim League, had rapidly failed to arrive at a settlement that would bring about religious reconciliation and social harmony. The Great Calcutta Killing of August 1946 began a year almost continuous rioting across north and eastern India. The violence culminated in the massacres that accompanied the transfer of population when the partition of India was announced. On Independence Day, 15th August 1947, there was an outburst of joy and hope, and unforgettable for those who lived throughout the time. But innumerable Muslims in Pakistan and Hindus and Sikhs in Pakistan. Muslims in India and Hindus and Sikhs in Pakistan were now faced with a cruel choice: the threat of sudden death or squeezing of opportunities on one side, the foreseeable tearing away from their old age roots and others. We have a whole chapter about the Indo-Pakistan division in our civics books. There you can see that the division has affected the citizens in a very cruel way. Millions of refugees were on move, Muslims to the east and west, Pakistan, Hindus and Sikhs into the West Bengal and the eastern half of the Punjab. Many perished before they reached their destination. Women were killed just to protect the honor of the family, so that when the partition was done, the families wouldn't suffer any social dilemmas. There was another serious problem faced by the new nation, was that of the princely states. Approximately one-third of the area of the subcontinent was under the control of Nawabs and Maharajas, who owned allegiance to the British crown, but were otherwise left mostly free to rule or misrule their territory as they wished. When the British left India, the constitutional status of these princes remained ambiguous. Among one contemporary observer remarked, some Maharajas now began to luxuriate in wild dreams of independent power in India of many partitions. The next topic is the making of the Constituent Assembly. The members of the Constituent Assembly were not elected on the basis of universal franchises. In the winter of 1945-46, provincial elections were held in India. The provincial legislature then chose their representatives to the Constituent Assembly. The Constituent Assembly then came into being, was dominated by one party, the Congress. The Congress swept the general seats in the provincial election, and the Muslim League captured most of the reserved Muslim seats. The League chose to boycott the Constituent Assembly, pressing its demand for Pakistan with separate constitution. The socialists were initially unwilling to join, for they believed that the Constituent Assembly was for they believed that the Constitution Assembly was a creation of the British, and therefore 82% of the members of the Constituent Assembly were also the members of the Congress. The Congress, however, was not a party in one voice. Its members differed in their opinion on critical issues. Socialism, while others defended landlordism. Some were close to the communal party, while others were aggressively secular. Through the national movement, Congress members had learned to debate their ideas in public and negotiate their differences. The discussion within the Constituent Assembly were also influenced by the opinion expressed by the public. As the deliberations continued, arguments were reported in newspaper and proposals were publicly debated. Criticism and counter-criticism in the press in turn shaped the nature of the conscience that was ultimately reached on a specific issue. In order to create a sense of collective participation, the public was also asked to send in their views on what was needed to be done. Many of the linguistic minorities wanted protection of their mother tongue. Religious minorities asked for special safeguards, while Dalits demanded an end to the caste oppression and reservation of seats in government bodies. Important issues of cultural rights and social justice raised in the public discussion were debated on the floor of assembly. 2.1.2 The dominant voices. The Constituent Assembly had 300 members. Of these, 6 members played a particularly important role. 3 were representatives of Congress, namely Jawaharlal Nehru, Vallabhbhai Patel, and Rajendra Prasad. It was Jawaharlal Nehru who moved the crucial objective resolutions as well as the resolutions proposing the national flags of India be a horizontal tricolor of saffron, white, and dark green in equal proportion, with a wheel in navy blue at the center. Vallabhbhai Patel, on the other hand, worked mostly behind the scenes, playing a key role in the drafting of several reports and working on reconciling opposing points of view. While Rajendra Prasad's role was as a president of assembly, where he had to steer the discussion along constructive lines while making sure all the members had a chance to speak. Besides the Congress trio, a very important member of the assembly was the lawyer and economist Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. During the period of British rule, Ambedkar had been a political opponent of the Congress, but on the advice of Mahatma Gandhi, he asked at independence to join the Union cabinet as law minister. In this capacity, he served as chairman of the drafting committee of the Constitution. Serving with him were 2 other lawyers, K.M. Munshi from Gujarat and Aladi Krishnaswamy Iyer from Madras, both of whom gave a crucial input in the drafting committee of the Constitution. Ambedkar himself had a responsibility of guiding the draft constitution through the assembly. This took 3 years in all, with the printed record on discussion taking up 11 bulky volumes. But while this process was long, it was also extremely interesting. The members of the Constituent Assembly were equivalent in expressing their sometimes very divergent points of view. In the presentations, we can discern many conflicting ideas of India, of what languages Indian could speak, of what political and economic system the nation should follow, of what moral values its citizens should uphold or disown. Second topic, the vision of the Constitution. On December 1946, Jawaharlal Nehru introduced objective resolutions in the Constituent Assembly. It was a resolution that outlined the defining ideals of the Constitution of independent India and provided framework within which the work of constitution making was proceeded. It proclaimed India to be an independent sovereign republic, guaranteed its citizens justice, equality, and freedom, and assured that adequate safeguards shall be provided for minorities, backward and tribal areas, and depressed and other backward classes. After the outlining of these objectives, Nehru placed the Indian experiment in the broad historical perspective. As he spoke, he said his mind went back to the historic efforts in the past to produce such documents of rights. Nehru's speech merits carefully scrutiny. What exactly was being stated here? He said that we are not just going to copy, where he meant that we are not going to copy the other constitutions which were already made in the world, such as the American and French resolutions. In returning to the past and referring to the American and French revolutions, Nehru was locating the history of constitution making in India within a longer history to struggle for liberty and freedom. But Nehru was not suggesting that those events were to provide any blueprint for the presentation, for the present, or that the ideas of those revolutions could be mechanically borrowed and applied in India. He stressed that the ideals and provisions of the constitution introduced in India could not be derived from somewhere else. We are not just going to copy, is what he said. The system of government established in India, he declared, had to fit into the temper of our people and be acceptable to them. It was necessary for us to learn from our own mistakes and failures and to make rules that were for us. The objectives of the Indian Constitution would be to fuse the liberal ideas of democracy with the socialist idea of economic justice and rework all these ideas within the Indian context. Nehru's plea was of creative thinking about what was appropriate for India. 2.1 The Will of the People. Somnath Lahiri, a communist member, felt that the Constituent Assembly was made by the British plans as the British would like it. The interim administrative headed by Nehru was in place, but could operate under the directions of the Viceroy and the British government in India. He urged the members and Indians in general to fully free themselves from the influence of imperial rule. In the winter of 1946 and 47, as the assembly deliberated, the British were still in India. An interim administrative headed by Jawaharlal Nehru was in place, but it could only operate under the directions of the Viceroy and the British government in London. The Constituent Assembly was expected to express the aspirations of those who had participated in the movement of independence, democracy, equality, and justice for ideals that had become intimately associated with social struggles in India since the 19th century. When the social reforms in the 19th century opposed child marriage and demanded the widows be allowed to remarry, they were pleading for social justice. When Swami Vivekananda's campaign for a reform of Hinduism, he wanted religions to become more just. When Jyotiba Phule in Maharashtra pointed to the suffering of the depressed caste or communist and socialist organized workers and peasants, they were demanding economic and social justice. The national movements against a government that was seen as oppressive and illegitimate was inevitably a struggle for democracy and justice for all citizen rights and equality. Point 3. Defending rights. In this topic, we learned that how were the rights of individual citizens to be defended, how were the oppressed groups to have any special rights, what rights would minorities have. Who in fact could be defined as minority. As the debate on the floor of the Constituent Assembly unfolded, it was clear that there were no collectively shared answers to any of these questions. 3.1 The Problems with Separate Electorates. On August 27, 1947, B. Bokar Baharu of Madras made a powerful plea for continuing separate electorates. Minorities exist in all lands, argued Bahadur. They could not be wished away. They could not be erased out of existence. The need to create a political framework in which minorities could live in harmony with others, in which minorities harmony, and the differences between communities could be minimized. Only separate electorates could ensure that Muslims had meaningful voice in the governance of the country. The needs of Muslims, Bahadur felt, could not be properly understood by non-Muslims, nor could a true representatives of Muslims be chosen by the people who did not belong to the community. This demanded for separate electorates provoked anger and dismay amongst most nationalists. In the passionate debate that followed, a range of arguments were offended against the demand. The English played their game under the cover of safeguard. R.V. Dhulekar told Bahadur. With the help of it, they allowed you to a long lull, gave it upon. Now there is no one to misguide. Partition had made nationalists frequently opposed to the idea of separate electorate. They were haunted by the fear of continued civil war, riots, and violence. Separate electorate was a poison that has entered the body of politics of a country, declared Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel. It was a demand that had turned one communist against another, divided the nation, caused bloodshed, and led to a tragic partition of the country. 3.2. We will need much more than this resolution. While welcoming objective resolutions, N.G. Ranga, a socialist who had been a leader of the peasant movement, urged the terms minorities be interpreted in economic terms. The real minorities of Ranga were the poor and the downtrodden. He welcomed the legal rights the constitution in granting to each individual, but pointed it to its limits. In his opinion, it was meaningless for the poor people in the villages to know that they now had a fundamental right to live and have full employment, or that they could have meetings, their conferences, their associations, and various other councils. It was essentially to create conditions where these constitutionally enriched right could be effectively enjoyed by them as well. Ranga also drew attention to the gulf that separated the broad masses of India and those claiming to speak on their behalf on the Constituent Assembly. The ordinary masses of our country, and yet most of us do not belong to the masses themselves. We are them. We are of them. We wish to stand for them. But the masses themselves are not able to come up with the Constituent Assembly. It may take some time. In the meanwhile, we are here to, as their trustees, as the campaign, and we are trying our best to speak for them. (3.3) We were suppressed for thousands of years. During the national movement, Ambedkar had demanded separate electorates for the depressed caste, and Mahatma Gandhi had opposed it, arguing that this would permanently segregate them from the rest of the society. How could the Constituent Assembly resolve this opposition? What kinds of protections were there, and repressed castes to be provided? Some members of the depressed caste emphasized that the problems of the untouchable could not be resolved through protection and safeguard alone. The disabilities were caused by the social norms and the moral values of caste society. Society had used their services and labor, but kept them at a social distance, refusing to mix with them or dine with them or allow them entry to the temples. We have been suffering, but we are prepared to suffer no more, said J. Nagappa from Madras. Nagappa pointed out that numerically the depressed castes were not a minority. They formed between 20 to 25% of the total population. Their suffering was due to the systematic marginalization, not their numerical insignificance. After the partition, violence Ambedkar too no longer argued the separate electorate. The Constituent Assembly finally recommended that untouchability be abolished, Hindu temples be thrown open to all castes and seats in legislature, and jobs in government office were reserved for the lower caste. Many recognized that this could not solve all problems. Social discrimination could not be erased only through constitutional legislation. There had to be a change in the attitude within the society, but the measures were welcomed by the democratic public. Fourth, the power of the state. One of the topics most vigorously debated in the Constituent Assembly was the respective rights of the central government and the state. Among those arguing for a strong center was Jawaharlal Nehru, as he put in a letter to the President of the Constituent Assembly. The draft constitution provided for 3 years, 3 lists of subjects: union, state, and concurrent. The subjects in the first list were to be preserved to be the preserve of the central government, while those in the second list were vested with the state. As for the third, here central and state shared responsibility. However, many more items were placed under executive control than in other federations. The Union had control over minerals and key industries. Besides, Article 365 gave the central the powers to take over a state administrative on the recommendation of the governor. The Constitution also mandated for a complex system of fiscal federation. In the case of the taxes, the center retained all the procedures. In other cases, it shared them with the state. In still other cases, it assigned them wholly to the states. The states, meanwhile, could levy and collect certain taxes on their own, including land and property tax, sale tax, and hugely profitable on bottled liquor. 4.1. The center is likely to break. The rights of the states were mostly equivalently defended by K. Samnath from Madras. A relocation of powers was necessary. He felt to strengthen not only the states but also the center. As for the states, Samnath felt that the proposed allocations of power would cripple them. Samnath predicted a dark. Ma'am, just a minute.
Yeah. What happened? Yes.
My Zoom camera was closed.
Okay. Not an issue. Continue.
Should I continue? Yes, ma'am.
But open the camera, huh? You should be visible.
Yes, ma'am. I was. Ma'am, am I visible now?
Yeah. Continue.
Yes, ma'am. Santana predicted a dark future if the proposed distribution of power was adopted without further scrutiny. In a few years, he said, all the provinces would rise in revolt against the center. Many others from the provinces echoed the same fear. They fought hard for fewer items to be put on the concurrent and union list. A member from Odisha warned that the centers is likely to break since powers uh, had been excessively centralized under the constitution. 4.2. What we want today is a strong government. The argument for greater power to the provinces provoked a strong reaction in the assembly. The need for a strong center had been underlined on numerous occasions since the Constituent Assembly had begun its session. Ambedkar had declared that he wanted a strong and united center, much stronger than the center we had created under the Government of India Act 1935. Reminding the members of the riots and violence that was ripping the nation apart, many members had repeatedly stated that the powers of Central had to be greatly strengthened to enable it to stop the communal frenzy. Before the partition, the Congress had agreed to grant considerable autonomy to the provinces. This had been part of an effort to assure the Muslim League that within the provinces there were where the Muslim leagues came to power, the center would not interfere. After the partition, most nationalists changed their positions because they felt that the early political pressure for the decentralization struck were no longer there. Constitution thus showed a distinct biases towards the rights of the Union of India over those of its constituent states. The language of the nation. Within the Constituent Assembly, the language issue was debated over many months and often generated intense arguments. By the 1930s, the Congress had accepted that Hindustani ought to be the national language. Mahatma Gandhi felt that everyone should speak in a language that common people could easily understand. Hindustani, a blend of Hindi and Urdu, was a popular language in a large section of people in India, and it was a composite language enriched by the people by the interaction of diverse culture. From the end of the 19th century, however, Hindustani was a language had been gradually changing as communal conflicts dependent. Hindi and Urdu also started growing apart. On the one hand, there was the move to Sanskritize Hindi, purging it of all the Persian and Arabic origin. On the other hand, Urdu was being increasingly Persianized. As a consequence, language became associated with the politics of religious identities. Mahatma Gandhi, however, retained his faith in the composite character of Hindustani. From the end of 5.1, a plea for in Hindi. In one of the earliest sections of the Constituent Assembly, R.V. Dhulekar, a congressman from the United Provinces, made an aggressive plea that Hindi be used as the language of constitution making. When he told that not everyone in the Constituent Assembly knew the language, Dhulekar retorted, "People who are present in this house to fashion a constitution for India and do not know Hindustani are not worthy of being members of this assembly. They better leave." As the house broke upon the commotion over these remarks, Dhulekar proceeded his speech in speech in Hindi. Almost 3 years later, on 12 September 1947, Dulekar's speech on the language of the nation once again sparked off a huge storm. By now, the Language Committee of the Constituent Assembly had produced its report and had thought of a compromise formula to resolve the deadlock between those who advocated Hindi as the national language and those who opposed it. Dulekar was not one who liked such an attitude for reconciliation. He wanted Hindi to be declared not an official language but a national language. He attacked those who protested that Hindi was being forced on the nation and mocked at those who said the name of Mahatma Gandhi that Hindustani rather than Hindi ought to be the national language. What particularly perturbed many members was the tone in which Dhulekar was arguing his case. Several times during his speech, the president of the assembly interrupted Dhulekar and told, "I do not think that you are advancing your case by speaking like this." But Dhulekar continued nevertheless. Point two and the last topic, the fear of domination. S.G. Durgabai, a member of the Constituent Assembly, said that there is intense opposition against Hindi in South India. After the eruption of controversy regarding the language, there is a fear in the opponent that Hindi is antagonist to provincial language and it cuts the roots of provincial language, the cultural heritage associated with it. She accepted that Hindustani as the language of people, but the language is being changed. Words from Urdu and regional languages were removed. This move eroded the exclusive and composite character of Hindustani, and due to this, anxieties and fears developed in the mind of people of different language groups. A member of Bombay, Sri Shankar Rao, stated as a member of Congress and follower of Mahatma Gandhi, he accepted Hindustani as the language of nation, but he warned that if you want my wholehearted support, you must do nothing which may raise any suspicion and which will set my fear. P.A. Ramalingan Chettiar from Madras emphasized that whatever was done had to be done with caution. Hindi should not be pushed aggressively and there should be a mutual adjustment and things should not be forced on people. Thus, the Constitution of India had arrived through discussion and debate at a process of give and take by adopting the middle path between two opposite positions. One main feature was granting right to vote to all adult citizens. After a long struggle, peasants, working class, and women were given right to vote. The next important feature was secularism. State had given guarantee of equal treatment to all religions through fundamental rights as freedom of religion, Article 25 to 28, cultural educational rights, Article 29 and 30, and the right to equality, Article 14, 15, and 17. Thus, Constituent Assembly's debate help us to understand the conflicts that went and negotiated in the framing of Constitution. Ma'am, I've done.
Yes. Anushka?
Ma'am?
Yes, Anushka. You have presented in a very good manner. You have tried your level best. And for the peer learning, children, those who are listening to you, they must learn how they have to present. You have meticulously prepared the PPT. I appreciate the work done by you. I appreciate the efforts. Your efforts are really good. Your efforts are really appreciable, but still, you need to
And there is some room for improvement.
you need to improve more, because these are the presentations which are going to help you out in your practicals. And ultimately, this knowledge, this is not only for a day. Okay, when you are studying about the framing of the Indian constitution, it is not the part of your subject or your syllabus, it's a part of your knowing. As an Indian citizen, you must know about the constitution, how it was framed, how it came into existence, how all deliberations took place, what was the controversy of Hindi, why people did not want to accept Hindi, because there were many problems. But we can highlight, we can tell that if a nation which has got a language, because language is the only way of communication. If you do not have a language, how will you communicate? How will you reach to the people? So language is a best way to reach to people, and a nation should have a language. How come Russia became a very developed country so early? Because they had a single language. How France in 1789, they had a revolution, and after that they gave a concept of nation state, and they became a nation very fast. And ultimately they gave an idea of nationalism, and nationalism is spreaded in Europe. So language is one binding factor to the people, to the citizens of a nation. So it plays an important role. And there was no other language other than Hindi. Hindi was thought that it is a very easy language. Though Sanskrit is the base of all the languages, because major controversy was there in South. All the four states, the leaders of the four states of the South were not ready at that time. There was a lot of controversy about Hindi, because in South India it is very difficult for the people to understand, and Sanskrit is the base of all the languages. But of course, Sanskrit is a bit difficult language, so it was decided, ultimately all came to one consent. Yes, Hindi is easily understood by the majority of the people in India. So Hindi. So this is the way I just want to convey to you, that you have prepared. This is one step. This is the first step for you. You'll be preparing the next chapters for your presentations, and I believe this is the way how you will be preparing the chapters, and your peers will learn from you all. And I from this platform I request one another child to give your consent for some different chapters, so that we complete a series of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, whatever the chapters are there, and then we will start again the second cycle. Okay, so thank you very much, Anushka, coming to the platform, giving such a wonderful lecture. And the other child who has prepared, be ready for the next time. Thank you very much to everyone. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am.